Hi, so this is my review of Volume 4 in A Search of Lost Time. It's called Sodom and Gomorrah. It's about 720 pages, at least in the translation that I have here. And this review is a little bit late in coming. I read this before the holidays, and it is now well into January, about halfway through January, but I was traveling around and enjoying myself, so I didn't get a chance to review this yet, but I'm well in to the next volume as well, which should be reviewed in the next week or two. This volume was really a lot about sexuality and the idea of sexual vices, what the narrator calls sexual vices. It is a searching look at how homosexuals were treated during Proust's time, and especially, I think, gives him some insight into his own sexuality and how he may have been treated and how he felt probably about his own sexuality. And this comes through most prominently in the character of Charlus, the Baron, who has to hide his sexuality, who has sexual encounters with men in a very secretive way and with a handful of men, and eventually becomes enamored with a musician named Morel, who he seeks to possess. And the idea of possession, again, is a theme, and especially with love and sexuality, is a theme throughout the entire work, not just this volume. But he seeks to possess him, and the idea of love and possession is very intertwined in this volume and also the whole work. And of course, Morel, like all the other characters that seek to be possessed in Search of Lost Time, does not like that, but is also privy to social circumstances, and so he doesn't have the money or the resources that Charlus has, and so he spends a lot of time with him. And everybody kind of knows that they're together, but then they don't talk about it. And that's one aspect. The other aspect of sexuality comes through in the character Albertine, who our narrator is dating, and he starts to find out that she has encounters with women and is also sleeping with him. And so she is bisexual, and he becomes very jealous of the encounters with women and the way that she looks at women, and he really puts her under a microscope in terms of jealousy. And he's echoing then the character of Swan in the very first and second volumes of In Search of Lost Time. Those passages about sexuality where Charlus was having to hide, and the sympathy that the narrator gives, which really, again, is probably a reflection of Proust, were very heartwarming. There was a lot of humor in this volume that wasn't in other volumes. I'd say at least this is the peak of the humor up until this point, although I have 2 more volumes to read. I would also say, he does some interesting things like addressing the reader directly, which, again, a contemporary editor or agent is going to tell you not to do. They're going to say, don't address the reader directly, and don't do a lot of the stuff that Proust does in here. But here, this volume is still, and it's still rocking strong. And so I think Proust is inviting us, by reading his work, to do whatever you want in your fiction and in your writing, and whatever works, right? Society plays a huge role in here, especially the salons. There's the 2 salons. There's the Verdurins, Wednesdays, and then there's also the Guermantes salon, which was talked about a lot in the previous volume as well. And he kind of almost pits those 2 together. At the very least, he describes them in very different ways through experience. The one thing that I would say I didn't maybe appreciate as much is that the narrator expresses a disdain for people of lower society. I don't know if, again, that's just the character, if that was Proust's own opinion, but he really expresses this opinion that anybody that's of a higher social standing is then a better person, and that they have better breeding, and that they have, better things kind of, weaved into them, especially when he looks at somebody like the Guermantes, how Guermantes family and how they respond to stuff. And he really attributes that to breeding, which is, of course, a very outdated mode of thinking, and not sure, again, if Proust thought this way or if this is just the way that he wanted the character to look. There is also that idea of possession and women as objects of art that can be troublesome at sometimes because they don't get, women really don't, and some women, right, I talked about this in my last review, like the Princess de Guermantes get a little bit more of that 360 view, but a lot of the women, especially the focal points in terms of love and sexuality, become very one or two dimensional, at least in this volume. I would say the other thing that he talks about a fair amount in here is the idea of consciousness. What does it mean to be conscious? And this may be the strength, at least in my own opinion, of the philosophical portions of this whole novel, is the idea of what does it mean to be conscious? And how does memory play into that idea of consciousness? And how does experience play into that idea of consciousness? And there are a lot of great passages in here about that. And also, I would say the Arabian Nights comes up a ton in this book. So if you're starting to read this book for the first time, or you're thinking about reading this book, I would say read the Arabian Nights first and then read this book, and it will just illuminate it even more. And if you've heard me say the Arabian Nights, it'll start to turn on. Every time you see the Arabian Nights or see his magic lantern, he calls it, the bells will go off for you. And you'll also start to see maybe how that plays into the idea of what it means to be conscious. Anyway, this is the end of my review, and I've really enjoyed this journey. We're getting close to the end of it. I just have until next month, February 10th, to get this done. So if I get it done a couple of days after, I won't be mad. But my 40th birthday is on February 10th. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.